Picture this. It is the dead of night somewhere in the mountains of western Iran. Hundreds of meters underground, elite Revolutionary Guard soldiers sit in the dark. The ventilation fans have stopped. The lights have gone out. The communications are dead. Above them, the mountain itself is on fire, not from the outside, but from within, as thousands of tons of missile fuel and munitions ignite in a chain reaction that turns their underground fortress into a furnace. They cannot run. They cannot fight. They cannot even call for help. The most sophisticated underground military network ever built in the Middle East, a system designed to be indestructible, has become the greatest death trap in modern military history. Welcome to World Brief Daily. If you are new here, this channel is dedicated to deep, data-driven analysis of the conflicts reshaping our world. If this kind of in-depth coverage is what you are looking for, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a breakdown like this one. Because what we are about to walk you through is not just a military operation. It is the systematic dismantling of an entire military doctrine, one that took Iran 4 decades and tens of billions of dollars to build, and that the United States and Israel erased in a matter of weeks. This is the full story of Operation Epic Fury. Let us start from the beginning. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes across Iran in what would become one of the most consequential military operations of the 21st century. The operation ran on 2 parallel tracks. America's Operation Epic Fury focused on destroying Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, naval forces, and defense industrial base, and Israel's Operation Roaring Lion, targeting Iran's missile and nuclear infrastructure. From the very first night, the objective was not just to wound Iran, it was to permanently remove its ability to project power beyond its borders. The opening phase focused on something invisible. Before a single bomb fell on a missile silo, American cyber warfare units and electronic warfare platforms blinded Iran's early warning radar network. These systems, built on copied technologies from China and Russia, were rendered completely dark within the first hours of the operation. For the personnel hundreds of meters below ground, their radar screens simply went black. They had no idea what was coming, and that window of vulnerability, that brief 48-hour gap in Iran's defensive vision, was all the United States needed. Here is where it gets devastating. The first major targets were Iran's so-called missile cities. These were not simply bases. They were underground civilizations. Vast tunnel networks bored into mountain ranges at a cost of billions of dollars, designed to survive nuclear strikes and keep Iran's ballistic missile force operational through any conflict. Iran's military doctrine for the last 40 years was built on one central promise: hide deep enough, dig far enough, pour enough concrete, and nothing can reach you. The first target to fall was the Imam Ali base near Khorramabad in Lorestan province, Iran's largest ballistic missile complex, a labyrinth of tunnels stretching between 36 and 50 kilometers in total length, housing hundreds of Shahab-3 variant missiles, concealed launch pads, and ammunition depots stacked to the ceiling. This was the backbone of Iran's regional deterrence. Its destruction was considered nearly impossible for any existing bomber platform. Then came the night of March 2, 2026. The operation's architecture was built on layered destruction. In the first phase, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, radar invisible, flying from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri on 18-hour non-stop missions, silently penetrated Iranian airspace and dropped GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds. These are the largest conventional bombs ever built. Their aerodynamic design, combined with gravitational acceleration, generates kinetic energy capable of penetrating 60 meters of reinforced concrete and hard rock. Upon detonation, they produce a seismic shockwave that creates irreparable structural fractures throughout an entire tunnel system. In seconds, the main doors and critical support columns at Khorramabad were gone. Immediately behind the B-2s came the B-1B Lancers, hunting down mobile air defense batteries one by one at supersonic speed. And then the B-52 Stratofortresses arrived, aging giants from the 1960s. But here is the genius of the strategy. Once air superiority was secured and Iran's defenses were blinded and dismantled, there was no longer any need for expensive stealth technology. According to defense analysts, the flight hour cost of a B-52 runs around $70,000 compared to hundreds of thousands for the B-2. The B-52s became flying arsenals, delivering thousands of pounds of JDAM smart munitions against every surface structure: ventilation shafts, communication antennas, power lines, and tunnel entrances. More than 8 major tunnel entrances were crushed in seconds. The physics of what happened next is staggering. When bunker-busting bombs detonate inside a closed underground system, the pressure wave has nowhere to go. It bounces, amplifies, and triggers every explosive stockpile in the facility simultaneously. According to heat signatures recorded by NASA's firm satellite systems, the temperature increases in the Khorramabad area after the attack were extraordinary. The chain reaction of exploding ammunition depots created heat waves that punched through the mountain to the surface. Iran's largest missile depot did not just collapse, it burned from the inside out. And as Khorramabad burned, the Tabriz silo complex in East Azerbaijan province shared the same fate. This facility, with its 100-kilometer tunnel network, was the primary source of Iran's retaliatory ballistic missiles. According to intelligence reports, between 1,000 and 1,500 Revolutionary Guard personnel stationed at these two facilities alone were left in absolute darkness and suffocation when the tunnel covers collapsed. This figure covers only 2 locations. When you factor in that Iran operates nearly 100 underground facilities across the country and that approximately 1/3 of its 960,000-strong military force is deployed underground, the scale of the strategic collapse becomes almost incomprehensible. According to U.S. Central Command's official statement, just 4 days after Operation Epic Fury began, as of March 4th, Iran's ballistic missile launches had decreased by 86%. One-way attack drone launches dropped by 73%. Admiral Brad Cooper announced that over 1,700 targets had been struck. A significant portion of Iran's entire missile stockpile and UAV munitions inventory had been destroyed. In the words of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, this was never a fair fight. But there is more to this story, and this is where it gets extraordinary. Parallel to the strikes on the missile cities, the United States and Israel were systematically targeting the nuclear infrastructure that Iran spent decades building in secret. And the centerpiece of that infrastructure was Natanz. If you are just joining us on World Brief Daily, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you can follow this story as it continues to evolve. There will be much more to come on this. On the morning of March 21st, 2026, the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, located 150 miles south of Tehran, was struck for the 5th time in as many months. To understand the scale of this attack, you first need to understand Natanz's architecture. The main enrichment facility sits 40 to 50 meters underground, surrounded by massive reinforced concrete shields and housing halls with a capacity of 50,000 centrifuges. On the surface, 2 massive halls spanning 2,500 square meters serve 1,000 personnel. But the real mystery lies further south at the Pykaz Mountain facility, carved into the Zagros Mountains, extending to depths of 100 meters, deeper even than NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain headquarters. The platform used was the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Israel's Channel 12 News confirmed that the attack was carried out with GBU-57 bunker buster bombs, the same 14-ton monsters deployed in Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. Israel had struck the underground enrichment halls first with its own GBU-72 and GBU-28 penetrators, weakening the structure. The United States then delivered the heaviest blow, dropping 2 GBU-57s directly onto the main centrifuge hall. On March 3rd, the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that entrance buildings at Natanz had sustained significant damage and that access to the underground facilities had effectively been cut off. Here is where the analysis becomes deeply troubling. Natanz is not a reactor. There is no nuclear chain reaction risk, no Chernobyl scenario. But the danger is not zero either. The facility's centrifuges process uranium hexafluoride gas under extremely high pressure. When UF6 comes into contact with moisture, it forms hydrofluoric acid, both chemically corrosive and radioactive. In a sealed, damaged underground complex with destroyed ventilation, the risk to any personnel still inside is acute. According to IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, verification of Iran's declared nuclear material inventories is already significantly overdue according to standard inspection practices. In other words, no independent authority currently knows with certainty how much enriched uranium is inside or where it is. An analysis published by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists in March 2026 indicated that Iran had moved approximately 540 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, enough material for roughly 11 nuclear weapons, into the underground tunnels at Isfahan prior to the June 2025 attacks. Airbus Pleiades NEO satellite imagery from June 9, 2025, showed a truck heading toward the southern tunnel entrance carrying 18 blue containers, which experts assessed could contain highly enriched uranium hexafluoride. As of this analysis, the IAEA still cannot confirm where that material is. And this brings us to Isfahan, and the most devastating single strike of the entire campaign. On the night of March 31, 2026, the United States dropped more than 40 tons of bunker-busting bombs on Iran's underground missile production and nuclear material storage complex beneath Isfahan. The Wall Street Journal, citing a U.S. official, described a high volume of penetrator munitions. Independent analysts using Maxar and Planet Labs satellite imagery estimated that between 45 and 50 GBU-31 and BLU-109 munitions, the most powerful unguided penetration bombs in the conventional arsenal, were used in a single night. Each weighs 2,000 pounds. Each is designed to punch through 1.83 meters of reinforced concrete before detonating. The physics of what happened inside those tunnels, a closed underground system packed with solid rocket fuel, precision guidance components, ballistic missiles, and thousands of tons of explosive material, defies ordinary description. The secondary explosions lasted for minutes. Satellite imagery showed red thermal craters across the entire face of Mount Safa. The chain reaction of ammunition depots igniting inside the mountain created explosions that punched columns of fire visible from miles away. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Isfahan's network encompasses a uranium conversion plant, a fuel fabrication facility, a centrifuge production unit, metal processing centers, and Iran's largest missile assembly complex, all interconnected under 50 kilometers of tunnels. Trump's statement that night was deliberate and pointed. This was no ordinary post-strike remark. By referencing Iran's nuclear and missile production capabilities directly, he was communicating to both the Iranian regime and the world. The physical infrastructure of Iran's nuclear ambitions has been removed from the equation. But here, a critical distinction must be made, and it is one that will define the coming years. The nuclear program is not a building. It is not a centrifuge. It is not a hall buried 50 meters beneath concrete and soil. As FDD analyst Andrea Stricker and others have noted, Iran's nuclear knowledge lives in the minds of thousands of engineers across dozens of universities and hundreds of research centers. Centrifuges can be replaced in months. Knowledge cannot be destroyed by any bomb ever built. Now let us turn to what happened at the political and human level inside Iran, because the collapse of the missile cities triggered something no one fully anticipated. On March 9, 2026, Mojtaba Khamenei, newly appointed as Iran's supreme leader in the chaos following the death of Ali Khamenei, was eliminated in his underground bunker less than 24 hours after taking office. The speed of the strike was the message. Joint U.S.-Israeli intelligence had decoded the exact coordinates of his location with extraordinary precision. According to reporting and analysis published after the event, this pointed directly to a catastrophic intelligence breach at the very top of the regime. The facility was supposed to be impregnable, classified above all other secrets. The regime had publicly claimed it was resistant to nuclear strikes. When state television was forced to announce that Mojtaba Khamenei had been seriously wounded, it was in effect admitting something far worse, that the regime's security doctrine had collapsed from within. Israeli intelligence subsequently released an elimination list via Channel 14 that included figures such as Ali Larijani and Ahmad Vahidi. The effect on the regime's upper echelons was immediate and psychological. Generals began accusing each other of being informants. Command posts were abandoned. Armored convoys dispersed. The institutional structure of Iran's military began to dissolve not from American strikes, but from the mutual paranoia of a command class convinced that the enemy was among them. President Masoud Pezeshkian appeared on state television on the morning of March 7, 2026, and delivered one of the most extraordinary statements ever made by a sitting head of state. He apologized on behalf of Iran to neighboring countries for attacks carried out by his own military. His reasoning revealed the depth of the collapse. Our commanders and leaders lost their lives. Our armed forces acted on their own authority during a period when there were no commanders. This was not a diplomatic maneuver. This was the civilian government of Iran publicly admitting that its own military was running amok, striking Dubai, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia's oil facilities, and civilian airports without authorization or strategic logic. The response from Washington was immediate. Posting directly on social media, President Trump declared Iran beaten to hell, describing it as the loser of the Middle East. Hardliners within Iran erupted. Parliament members called Pezeshkian's apology insulting treason. The judiciary chief effectively staged a coup against the civilian government, announcing that attacks would continue. Hours after Pezeshkian's statement, a drone struck Dubai International Airport, forcing the suspension of all flights and the halt of Emirates Airlines operations. The UAE announced it had intercepted 16 ballistic missiles and 121 drones. Jordan reported 119 missiles and UAVs crossing its territory. Bahrain sounded air raid sirens. This was the moment Iran's internal civil war became visible to the entire world. On the night of March 7th, another dimension of the campaign unfolded, one that sealed Iran's military fate in a different way. Israeli and U.S. forces struck Mehrabad International Airport in Tehran, Isfahan's air bases, and a chain of petroleum refineries surrounding the capital. According to IDF official statements, 17 aircraft belonging to Iran's Quds Force were completely destroyed or severely damaged at Mehrabad. Cargo planes that had for years served as the air bridge transporting weapons, cash, and missiles to Hezbollah and proxy groups across the region. The airport was struck 3 times in a single week. In Isfahan, the target was symbolic and devastating. Iran's fleet of F-14 Tomcat fighters, American-made aircraft purchased during the Shah's era in the 1970s, kept flying for 45 years through sanctions-busting ingenuity and the extraordinary skill of Iranian engineers, was destroyed in their hangars in a single night. The last operational F-14 fleet in the world, the star of the regime's propaganda reels, was reduced to charred fuselages on a burning runway. The Iranian Air Force as a functional institution ceased to exist. Simultaneously, 4 major oil depots in Tehran were ignited. The Nava Navid, Shahi Rey, and Shahan army refineries were destroyed. Burning fuel flowed into Tehran's drainage channels. The capital awoke on the morning of March 8th to a skyline of black smoke and the smell of burning petroleum. According to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, this dual destruction of airports and fuel infrastructure condemned the regime to strategic confinement within its own territory. Even if Russia had wanted to send spare parts, there were no usable runways. Even if China had wanted to deliver supplies, there were no airports to land at. And there is the intelligence dimension of all this that demands attention. Striking a cargo plane at a specific parking stand at Mehrabad, targeting an F-14 inside its hangar at Isfahan, locating a newly appointed supreme leader inside a classified bunker within 24 hours. None of this is explained by satellite imagery alone. You can see an aircraft from space. You cannot know from space whether it is fueled and ready to fly that night. That requires a source inside. The speed of the targeting, the surgical precision of the strikes, the systematic identification of every facility simultaneously, these point to an intelligence penetration of the Iranian military that goes to the highest levels. This is what truly destroyed Iran's command structure. Not just the missiles, not just the bombs, the knowledge spreading through every general and every colonel that the enemy might be sitting at the desk next to them. On the night of March 14, 2026, the United States carried out one of the heaviest bombardments in modern military history against Karg Island, the coral reef in the Persian Gulf through which 90% of Iran's oil exports pass. B-52s, B-1B Lancers, and B-2 Spirits deployed simultaneously, dropping bunker-busting bombs that obliterated 90 distinct military targets, anti-ship batteries, cruise missile silos, sea mine depots, and all command and control sensors. According to CENTCOM's official reports, all 4 ships of Iran's Shahed Soleimani-class corvette fleet had been eliminated by March 11th. As reported by the Gulf International Forum, more than 120 Iranian naval vessels had been destroyed or incapacitated since the operation began. But here is the extraordinary strategic calculation behind Karg Island. The United States did not touch the oil, not a single storage tank, not one export terminal. The regime had actually begun draining Karg's tanks in mid-February in anticipation of the strike, but it could not move the military infrastructure. When the bombs fell, the message was surgical. The oil keeps flowing, the global economy stays intact, but the military machine protecting it is gone. According to a 1984 CIA document cited by military historians, these facilities had been described as the most vital element in Iran's oil system. That description remained accurate 42 years later, and in a single night, all of it, the multi-billion-dollar naval deterrent, was erased. Unable to respond militarily, Iran made a move that completed its strategic isolation. The Revolutionary Guards issued an official statement threatening the United Arab Emirates, declaring that UAE ports, docks, and areas hosting U.S. personnel were legitimate targets and calling on UAE citizens to evacuate. According to reporting by I-24 News, the UAE became the first Gulf country to respond militarily on March 8th, striking Iranian water purification and filtration facilities in retaliation for Iran's bombing of Kuwaiti and Emirati infrastructure. A coalition that Iran's entire strategic doctrine was built to fracture had instead been united against it. From a global economic standpoint, the consequences were immediate and severe. According to Reuters, Brent crude surged past $150 per barrel and WTI to over $100. Gasoline prices in the United States exceeded $4 per gallon for the first time in nearly 4 years. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index dropped 13% in March alone. Qatar's energy minister Saad Al-Kaabi publicly warned that if the conflict continued, Gulf energy producers could be forced to declare force majeure. Analysts warned that a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz could push oil prices toward $200 per barrel. And here we reach the deepest paradox at the heart of this entire campaign. Militarily, the United States and its allies achieved something extraordinary. According to the White House official statement, in 38 days of major combat operations, the joint force achieved every one of its defined military objectives. Iran's ballistic missile and drone capabilities destroyed, the Iranian Navy eliminated, Iran's defense industrial base, from carbon fiber production to solid rocket fuel mixing to final missile assembly, systematically dismantled. According to CENTCOM, over 13,000 strikes were carried out and at least 155 Iranian vessels were destroyed. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane stated plainly that every objective defined by the president had been accomplished. But military victory and strategic resolution are not the same thing. GBU-57s can blast through mountains. They cannot sweep mines from a 30-kilometer waterway. They cannot neutralize kamikaze drones and anti-ship missiles positioned along 1,500 kilometers of Iranian coastline. The mine-clearing operation required to safely open the Strait of Hormuz could take weeks, during which every ship in the waterway is a potential target and no insurance company on Earth will write a policy. This is the asymmetric contradiction that defines this conflict. The Revolutionary Guard lost the conventional war in the first week, but with its Ghadir-class mini-submarines, its coastal missile batteries buried in the Zagros Mountains, its Houthi proxies in Yemen, and its ability to strike tankers in what shippers consider safe waters, as demonstrated by the drone strike on the Kuwaiti supertanker Al Salmi in Dubai's outer anchorage, Iran has retained a residual asymmetric capability that is imposing an increasingly heavy toll on the global economy with each passing day. That is where negotiations stand as of now. On April 8, 2026, a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan came into force. As reported by Al Jazeera, Iran agreed to immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz, while the United States agreed to halt military strikes. The ceasefire was described by Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif as a demonstration of remarkable wisdom from both parties. Iran submitted a 10-point negotiation proposal covering sanctions relief, the release of frozen assets, nuclear enrichment rights, Strait of Hormuz transit arrangements, and compensation for war damages. Trump described the plan as a workable basis for negotiation. But as NPR reported on April 12th, talks in Islamabad between Vice President Vance and the Iranian delegation collapsed without a deal. Iran's demands, retaining control of the strait, receiving war reparations, preserving its nuclear enrichment program, and ending Israeli operations against Hezbollah, proved incompatible with Washington's core conditions. According to Time, the U.S. declared the Islamabad proposal its final and best offer. The ceasefire status became uncertain. A second round of talks is reportedly being explored through mediators, but as of this analysis, no agreement is in place. As reported by NPR, following the collapse of talks, the U.S. military announced it would blockade ships entering or exiting Iranian ports, a move that escalates the economic pressure on Tehran dramatically. Let us step back and look at the true strategic picture. Iran's underground missile cities, built over 40 years and representing the physical embodiment of the regime's invincibility myth, are gone. The nuclear enrichment infrastructure at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan has been severely degraded. The Air Force that once scrambled F-14s to project national power exists only in the regime's propaganda archive. The cargo planes that kept Hezbollah and Iraqi militias armed and funded have been reduced to ash on a runway. The naval fleet designed to close the Strait of Hormuz and hold the world hostage has been sunk. The chain of ballistic missile production, from raw carbon fiber to final assembly, has been severed at every link. As Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated, Iran's defense industrial base is functionally defeated, and yet the Strait of Hormuz is still a problem. The tanker industry is still paying crisis-level insurance premiums. The global economy is still absorbing a shock that threatens to push oil to levels not seen since the energy crises of previous generations. This paradox is the most important strategic lesson of this war. Military dominance does not automatically translate into political resolution. Iran's leadership, whatever remains of it, understands that its last remaining leverage is not missiles or aircraft or submarines. It is geography, a 55-kilometer channel through which a fifth of the world's oil and a third of global liquefied natural gas flows every single day. The question the world is now asking is whether the United States and its partners can translate military supremacy into a durable political settlement before the economic costs of this conflict become irreversible. And the secondary question, the one that military analysts in Moscow, Beijing, and Pyongyang are losing sleep over, is what the destruction of Iran's underground doctrine means for every regime that built its security on the same assumption. The GBU-57 that found Mojtaba Khamenei's bunker within 24 hours sent a message that no amount of concrete can answer. No matter how deep you go, the technology exists to find you, and the intelligence networks exist to hand over your coordinates. The underground safety doctrine that authoritarian regimes have built since the Cold War was not just tested in Iran. It was invalidated. For Russia, this means Yamantau Mountain in the Urals, Putin's reported deep bunker sanctuary, is no longer the guarantee of survival it once appeared to be. For North Korea, the vast tunnel networks woven beneath its mountains now look less like shields and more like tombs. For China, the command centers prepared for a Taiwan contingency now carry a new vulnerability. The assumption that geography provides protection has been shattered. The United States and Israel sent a message to every rival on Earth. The flawless synchronization of cyber warfare, signal intelligence, advanced satellite systems, and penetration of human networks at the highest levels reduces the protection afforded by geography to zero. This is the new era of warfare, not the era of the biggest bunker, the era of the deepest intelligence. Iran has been its first and most tragic test case. As we continue to monitor the Islamabad talks, the status of the ceasefire, and the negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz, World Brief Daily will keep you updated with the analysis you need to understand what is really happening. Not just the headlines, but the strategic depth beneath them. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit subscribe to the channel right now, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who wants to understand the real shape of this conflict. The story is far from over, and as things develop, we will bring you the most comprehensive, sourced, and rigorous analysis available anywhere. Thank you for watching World Brief Daily.